Hey guys, today we're going to talk about something that I have been asked, whether by individual clients or athletes, hundreds of times, I'm sure, over the last 13 years, and it is, what can I be doing outside of my current training plan that allows me to hit my goals? Right? If you're a coach watching on this, I'm sure even this last month, I'm sure you've had a client walk up to you and say, hey, you know what, these 3 days a week aren't enough. I don't think I'm getting to my results fast enough. What can I be doing outside of the walls of the gym? And so I'm here to kind of break that down a little bit. Hopefully, if you're a client or an athlete, this helps put your coach's response which is usually don't do anything more, into perspective. And if you're a coach, hopefully going through this as a coach, two things. Number one, you can kind of see the mindset of the client. And number two, I hope that this gives you sort of a little bit of a bigger understanding of how to appropriately answer them. I don't think the blanket statement outside of this video is don't do anything more, but I also think that we need to sort of have a good blend of let's have an open discussion while also educating the client and making sure that they're feeling like they're being heard. So more is not better, right? More does not equal better. More is more, better is better, right? That's a no-brainer. That's a no-duh. Like, why are you even making that a point? I'm making that a point because I believe a lot of us don't get that. If I want to be better at something, putting more time into it does not necessarily make me better. I learned this lesson the hard way when I believe I was in high school, and I was taking AP history. Should not have been in that class at all. We got our first test back, and I failed it miserably. And I went up to our teacher, and I had no idea why I had failed. I had studied more for that test than I had studied for any other test in my life. And he looked at me and he said, the amount of hours you put in does not dictate the grade that you're gonna get. And he said, were you distracted? What were you doing? Was the TV on? Were you actually engaged in what you were doing? Now from there, he didn't just leave me with these blanket questions. He explained to me how to do things more efficiently, things I needed to look at. Well, sure enough, as I came back, took other tests that year, I did much better. So I think that was a very early lesson for me in the fact that more does not guarantee victory. More does not make me better than someone who is doing less. In fact, I believe a lot of times it's probably the opposite. Let's move on to number two. And so this opposite, right, the less approach, I think is going to come in as extremely beneficial for a lot of us. And that is that volume control is the most important thing for a client or an athlete the older we get in training. Okay? And what do I mean by that? I mean that as we age, we need to do less in order to both maintain previously established gains or to even increase in whatever athletic endeavor we want. Let's look at competitive athletes, whether functional fitness athletes, some of us might refer to them as like CrossFit athletes, etc. But I'm using this as an example because we see this sport bringing older individuals to the big stage. And so we're not just seeing 20 and 30-year-olds compete, we're seeing 40, 50, and 60-year-olds compete. If we look at what's happening, the individuals who are most successful are the individuals who, as they age, they're not as concerned with how much intensity they're putting in. They're not as concerned with how much strength work they're doing versus aerobic work, etc. These are all important. The number one thing that they're doing is they're managing their volume. They're managing how much load they put themselves under every day of every week of every month. So for those of you who are getting older, right, and I mean older in two ways. Number one, I mean in the exercise realm of things. So for those of you like myself, 30s and above, right, we're getting a bit older, right? And the other group would be those of you who have been exercising for a very long time, 10 plus years. If you're saying to yourself, I need to do more to get the benefits that I want, I would highly encourage you to rethink that approach and to start looking, maybe I'm doing too much. All right? I'll give a real life example. A client and a really good buddy of mine, his name is Nevin. Nevin and I have been training together for, I think, coming up on 10 years now. Nevin will be 42 or 43 this year. And one of Nevin's goals in life was to pull a lot of weight off the floor. And no point before this point was he pulling above 500. Well, after he turned 40, he pulled 535 pounds off the floor, okay? I don't care who you are, what age you are, what your background is, I think that's a lot of weight. We didn't do anything special other than manage his volume. And how did we do that? We took Nevin, who loved exercise, and we took him from 6 days of training a week down to 3 days of training. And that's all we manipulated. And if that's not enough to get those of you who have been exercising for a bit long to start to at least kind of lean in a little bit, I don't know what is, right? We can talk about this all day long, but I think numbers speak for themselves. So I think my buddy Nevin pulling 535 pounds as a 40 plus year old, I think that's impressive. And I think that speaks volumes, no pun intended, volumes for itself on what it means to sometimes reduce rather than increase. Let's move on. Overtraining, it's gonna kill your gains, right? So overuse injuries, repetitive injuries, the more I do, the more sophisticated of an approach I need. And this is less geared towards coaches and more geared towards the individual who believes that they have to go and search elsewhere outside of their coach. So I come into Powertrain, I'm working with Coach Brian. Coach Brian has me on a great program 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, I don't think that that's enough, and so now I get a membership to the rec center and I start doing my own stuff. And now it's not Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I still don't think it's enough. Now all of a sudden it's my work week. And now that's still not enough. Now I'm at 6 days a week. Well, eventually I am going to wind up doing too much. And there's several reasons. Number one, it's just a blanket statement. It's probably too much. Number two is because I know inherently, I know deep down that Brian's gonna tell me that I'm not being smart by going and doing my own thing. I don't tell him this. And so I don't know what Brian knows about programming, and he has his layout. He knows what he's got programmed for me, and now he has back squats programmed for me on Wednesday, but on Tuesday I go to the rec center and I'm back squatting. And now 2 days in a row I'm back squatting really heavy. For those of us who have ever made that mistake, we understand what kind of emotional and structural damage this can do, right? So there needs to be a structure in place, and we need to understand that that the more volume I add, the more of a detailed and rigid plan I must have. There's a huge difference between writing a program that is 6 days a week versus 4 days a week versus 3 days a week, etc. This is going to be very nuanced. I think for those of you who are going to start tuning in to some of these educational pieces, I think you'll start to realize that one of my favorite words is nuance, because I do believe that a lot of this is nuanced. A lot of what we're talking about is subjective. A lot of this isn't necessarily written in stone. But here's my nuanced piece, is that performance is not gained, it is allowed. And when we go to the weight room, I do believe that a lot of us think it is gained, right? If I want to increase my pull-ups, I do more pull-ups. My pull-ups, I'm getting stronger, I got more pull-ups, I gained more pull-ups. That is not the case. It is allowed through my central nervous system, okay? And let's do a little experiment here to kind of show that I believe that I'm correct. I'm very biased, I always believe I'm correct. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna max out my back squat. I'm gonna go for a 1 rep maximum on my back squat. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Do it 7 days in a row. Tell me how you feel on that Sunday, okay? Additionally, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna have the worst work week of my life. If I'm used to working a 40-hour week, I'm gonna wind up working 80 hours that week. Nothing's going right, not to mention I'm catching every light on the way to work. I've gotten a ticket. It's just the worst possible week of my life. And now at the end of that week, I am gonna go and I'm gonna try to hit a back squat for a 1 rep max, okay? Any of us who has ever happened to this, or even those of us who this has never happened to, I think we can start to understand that it's not just a structural gain, but there is a lot more that is involved, and this is our central nervous system. If things are simply gained, then yes, more would equal better. But through these two examples here, we can start to say, you know what, maybe it isn't gained, maybe it is allowed, maybe there's more that goes into my training than simply picking weight up and increasing that weight every single week. I've sort of beaten this concept to death about how, well, more is not better, and now we're just gonna walk away and we're not gonna give you any advice on what to do if you do wanna do more, and that would be very selfish. And a lot of you would be scratching your head saying, why did I just listen to him ramble if he's not actually gonna give me any advice? So from here down, we're actually gonna talk about, for those of you who are gonna just say, you know what, Mitch is wrong, these first 4 points are stupid, I'm still gonna do more. That's all well and good, but at least let's look at points 5 through 8 so we make sure that we're not falling into our overuse injuries, that we make sure that we're not beating down our bodies, we're not overtaxing the central nervous system. Micro wins. This one is huge. I preach this to my clients all the time. So for those of you who've never heard this, what is the difference between medicine and poison? And the answer is dosage, right? Any medicine we have out there, I can probably kill you with it if I give you too much, right? So I think this applies in terms of volume and trying to do more with our exercise routine. So what do a lot of us do? I go in, I see Coach Brian 3 days a week. I really catch that bug. I'm so excited to be working out and I just want more, right? That's inherently we want more. And so what do? Is I start picking up running 4 days a week. And so I just went from 3 days of intense exercise to 7 days. That is not a micro win, all right? If you want to start doing more and you are gonna have an open conversation with your coach, start small. Okay, maybe I go from doing 1 extra day at powertrain. Maybe I talk to Brian and now instead of 3 days, I'm going to 4 days. Maybe Brian and I discuss getting outside and going for a run 1 day a week. And now I'm gonna hang on to that for a bit, a couple weeks, a couple months, and progress from there, add from there. Number 6 is have a structured plan. I think I've probably said talk to a coach hundreds of times now in my video, but I do think that that's always our fallback. Make sure you're communicating with your coaching staff, but be specific. And I don't just mean be specific when talking to your coach. I mean be specific when you're creating this reason why you would need more. And I think that if we start to be very specific, 2 things will happen. Is number 1, we're gonna realize that we probably don't need more. But number 2, if we do decide that we need more, we are gonna have a much more structured plan, which is going to greatly reduce the chances of overtraining. It's going to greatly manage my volume, and I am going to really prevent any central nervous system ouchies from happening. So if I want to increase my 5K time, that is very different than me saying I just want to get healthier. Or if I want to increase my 800 meter time, that is a whole lot more specific than me saying, Brian, I want to run better, right? The more specific we can get, the more we can narrow in on that particular objective that we wish to reach. There are seasons for everything. I get a lot of hate from a lot of clients for this. because I believe that as humans, we want everything, we want it now, and it's hard to put things on the back burner. It's hard to rank certain things. So if I want to run a full marathon and I want to deadlift 3 times my body weight and I want to do 30 strict pull-ups and I want to, a really good coach is probably going to look at you and laugh and say, well, okay, like, let's chip away at this. But as Gen Pop, I don't like that. I want all of it right now. We need to start looking at things in terms of seasons. So let's go through that list. Maybe for the next couple months, I really prioritize my deadlift. And so Brian creates a program where we're doing a lot of pulling, we're doing a lot of hinging. He's really helping that deadlift go from X amount to X amount plus a lot, right? I need to be mature enough to say, okay, if I really want to increase my deadlift, I probably can't be doing a whole lot of extra volume with my pull-ups, with my marathon training, right? I have to put things in sort of a ranking order. A couple months go by, I'm really pleased with where my deadlift is, and now I can turn around to Brian and say, hey Brian, I want to work on some running stuff. This doesn't mean that we just throw away the deadlift, and it doesn't mean that if I reduce volume on the deadlift, that my deadlift is just going to go back to where it was. It just means that I might not be getting as steep of an incline on my deadlift progression as I was when I was really focused on my deadlift. So now maybe I'm just maintaining with that deadlift, but it came from the floor all the way up, and now I'm really trying to take that running distance, time, whatever it is I so choose, and I'm bringing that up. That ties into a little bit of crude math, and for those of you who are math experts, this might be the wrong percentage. I don't care if it's the wrong percentage, please feel free to call me out, but I hope you can at least see what I mean by this is consistent behaviors is always going to beat out intensity and volume. And what do I mean by that? Let's tie this into sort of our year-long approach of there's seasons for everything, is I see this a lot. Let's say I'm gonna go to the gym for an entire year and every week I'm doing 3 times a week. Let's say due to family obligations, vacation, etc., I'm getting in 50 weeks out of the year. That's somewhere around 150 sessions a year. Again, that math could be totally wrong, I don't care. Let's say that I am someone who I am gonna try to ratchet up that training, right? But here's what always happens. I do too much too soon and then I fall off. I get the burnout, right? And if you're a coach, you're probably chuckling because you know of an athlete or two who has done this. And so yeah, maybe up front, in the beginning of that year, it might look like, oh man, like I'm getting so much more work, and then you disappear for 3, 4, 5 months. The example I used here was, I believe you missed out on 3 or 4 months, and I'm only getting 76% of the training that I could have had if I focused more on consistency, just showing up those 3 days a week, than I did on trying to get extra work in, winding up hurt, winding up burnout, whatever it may be, and now I'm losing training versus gaining training. This last piece I think is huge because we never want to talk about it, and it's raise your minimums. And so I think we can look at this either in terms of adding volume, or we can look at this, and my hope is that this point is what's going to get you to realize that this does not equal this, okay? I want you to realize that I can look at my minimums, and now I'm not concerned with needing to do more. And so we'll go back to the deadlift example. Let's say I want to deadlift 500 pounds, and right now, I can deadlift 400 pounds. What happens to a lot of us is that we get hyper fixated on that 500 pounds, which would be our maximum. And we train for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and yes, it goes from 400 to 410. A couple weeks goes by, I'm at 425, a couple weeks goes, I see that raising. But 6 months goes by, whatever it is, I go to pull 500, it's not there. Okay, keep trying, it's still not there, it's still not there, it's still not there. We begin to get frustrated. Why am I not hitting this 500 pounds? First and foremost, let's just take everything else out of the equation. Let's say your programming is perfect, you and your coach are talking together. Like, let's not look at what could be going on as to why you're not hitting that 500. What I want to encourage you to look at is what's going on with my minimums, right? Maybe when I first started deadlifting and my max was 400, maybe pulling 135 pounds off the floor still felt relatively challenging. Maybe not for one rep, but maybe let's say, 5 or 6 reps as a warm up, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's, I'm feeling warm. What happens as that maximum raises, maybe slowly, right? But my minimums, start looking at your minimums. All of a sudden, man, that 135 is a breeze. Whereas before, 5 or 6 reps was enough to tap me out. Now I'm doing it for sets of 10, 12, 15, whatever. And if we start looking at exercise and my journey in terms of this minimums and maximums, I do believe that for a lot of us, we're going to start to let go of the desire to do more because we're not fixated on one specific event, one specific exercise, one specific number, and we're starting to see our performance increases through minimums, through everything that isn't that arbitrary one point on this entire map of my fitness journey. So I hope that these 8 points made sense. I hope that this really helps put volume into perspective. I really hope that if at the bare minimum that this is going to, for those of you who do think that you want more, to have an open conversation with your coach. Coaches, same thing. I hope that this really gives you a little bit more tools in your tool belt to help have a good conversation with those athletes, constantly chirping to give you more. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, share this with your buddies, share this with someone you hate. Thanks for tuning in. Until my ramblings next time.